Hi everyone, I'm Liz and welcome back to Elizabeth Ann Can Stitch. Hi everyone, welcome back to another Stitchmas video. In today's video, we are going to be making this table runner. I was inspired by Edita Sitar of Laundry Basket Quilts to make this table runner. She has been showing all kinds of beautiful projects made with her new Noel Christmas fabrics, and when I saw the table runner, I just knew I had to make one. So I got one charm pack, a 1/4 yard for binding, and a 1/2 yard for the backing, and I put together this table runner in about 3 or 4 hours. And yeah, this rest of this video is just me walking you through making this super simple, easy table runner. I did the quilting on my home machine, just basic straight lines, did a machine binding, and I mean, same day it was out on my dining room table for us to enjoy. Okay, so here is where I'm starting from for my table runner. I have a charm pack, so I have 42 5-inch squares. Yeah, 42 pieces. And then I have 4 1/2 yards of fabric from the line that I just thought were pretty and I liked. So I have these, and then I also have, I forgot to grab it, but I have the green floral print that I used on the back of my scrappy Trip Around the World quilt. I have a lot left over from that, so that will probably end up being the backing fabric, that green floral, and one of these I will use for the binding. But first, let's open up this charm pack. So this is going to be, I think, the easiest project ever because all I'm going to do is pair up my charm squares and make 1/2 square triangles. And then I'm going to sew all the 1/2 square triangles together into a table runner. You can do this with any size squares, with any amount of squares, whatever you want to do. I just want to use this charm pack. And so I can make 21 pairs out of these. And I think actually the layout I think I'm going to end up doing is going to be a 5x8. I'll probably putting some sort of graphic on the screen, a 5x8. So I only need 40 1/2 square triangles, meaning there's 2 of these that I don't need to use. So first I'm going to separate kind of lights and darks and start pairing up my, my squares. Yeah, this is the fabric that I was talking about, that I have a bunch left over from my Christmas quilt that I want to use on the back of my table runner. Okay, so let me kind of count up what I have because I want a kind of even mix of lights and darks. Okay, perfect. So this is 20 dark fabrics. So these are gonna be my 20 darks. And so that must mean that there are 22 fabrics over here. Let's see. Yep, there's 22 fabrics here. So I think I'm gonna skip out these green polka dots because I feel like it's pretty medium, like it could kind of go either way. And I want like a contrast, I want like a light and a dark. I think everything else is good. I think I'm just gonna leave out these 2 green. And so then I'm gonna pair all of these up into a light and dark match. Okay, so now I have 20 pairs of light and dark, and I laid it out this way just so I could make sure I was getting a good random mix and wasn't pairing the same thing twice. And yeah, so now that I have all of my pairs sewn together, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to the sewing machine and I'm gonna lay my squares right side together. And at this point, if you want, you can draw a line kind of corner to corner on your squares, but I use a Cluck Cluck Sew seam guide tape. So I don't actually mark. I just go straight to the sewing machine with my pairs and I sew a 1/4 inch from the center on each side so that I can create 2 1/2 square triangles out of every pair of fabrics. And I don't worry about everything being too precise because I am going to trim my 1/2 square triangles in the next step. So let's go to the sewing machine and sew together all of our triangles. Okay, so this is the washi tape that I use. It's a seam guide, 1/4" seam guide tape. And so you line the red line up with your needle and then run it straight down your machine. And then that gives you a, center line and then lines on each 1/4" on each side. And so I'm going to use that instead of marking my squares to make my half square triangles. This stuff comes in a roll for like maybe $6 or $7, and I haven't made it through a whole roll yet, so it's well worth it. And I love how much time it saves me in not having to mark lines on smaller squares like this. So since I'm going on a 1/4" on each side, what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up my top and bottom point with this outside black line. And then what that means is then I'm sewing a 1/4" away from the center by doing that. So I'm just gonna line up. I am using just an open toe foot, and I'm using a 1.8 stitch length, which is my preferred stitch length for quilt piecing. And I'm just following this black line on the left with my center point so that my stitching comes out a 1/4" away. And then I grab my next pair and line it up the same way, and then I'll chain piece all 40 of my pairs at once. I should have said 20 pairs. I'm sewing together 40 squares into 20 pairs. And each pair of squares make 2 half square triangles. So if you want to make yours bigger or smaller or whatever, you will know that each 2 squares will give you 2 half square triangles. So I have the first side sewn of all 20 of my pairs. So all I'm gonna do is flip it around. I'm not gonna separate any of the chains, and I'm just gonna run the other side through in the exact same way I just did the first side, lining up the point on this black line. And now we'll have a seam a 1/2 inch away from our original one, a 1/4" from the middle. Okay, so I've got all of my squares sewn together with a seam on a 1/4" of each side of the center. Okay, so I'm gonna clip them apart and we'll move on to the next steps. So the next step is to cut all of our squares in half between the lines we just sewed. So let me start doing that. Okay, so now we're going to press all of our half square triangles open, and you can see that each pair of squares gave us 2 matching half square triangles. So I'm going to get these ironed and then we'll go trim them up. I like to press mine open, but of course you can press to the side if that is your preference. Okay, so I've got my stack of half square triangles that have all been pressed open, and now I'm going to trim them down. So you should be able to trim all of your half square triangles down to 4.5 inches square. I just use the 45-degree angle line on my ruler and make sure that 4.5 inches is on the square, and then I do 2 sides at a time. All right, and then I have a 4.5 inch finished half square triangle. So I'm gonna get all of these trimmed up, and then we will work on laying out our little quilt top of a table runner. Okay, so I decided I'm gonna do a pinwheel layout. I had played around with doing diamonds of the darker and diamonds of the lighter, but I think I like this pinwheel look. And so basically the layout is gonna end up being 4 blocks with all of their darks positioned in a pinwheel. And I think I said earlier I was doing a 5x8 layout. No, I'm doing a 4x10. I measured out what 5x8 would be, and no, I'm gonna do a 4x10 layout. So that will give me, you know, each one of these kind of making a block. So it'll be 2 blocks by 5 blocks long. And so I'm gonna lay these out on my table so I can start sewing together the whole little quilt top for the runner. And I have my blocks just separated into pink, red, and green, just so I can kind of make sure I'm, you know, doing kind of a random layout while I lay these out. You wanna say hi to the people? Say hi. Okay, so now I am just going to sew all of my blocks together in the layout that I just made, and I'm going to go row by row. But first, I'm going to switch back to my 1/4 inch foot. My 1/4 inch foot for my Juki has this little guide on it, which means I don't want to use it when I have to sew on top of fabric, like when I'm making my half square triangles. That's what I use, that plastic flat foot. But for sewing all my blocks together, I like to use my 1/4 inch foot. And this is just a standard foot you can get for Juki and for, I think, any kind of machine that has this little guide on it. I really like it. And at the bottom, I'm just making sure my diagonal half square triangle seams match up, as well as the corner matches. You can totally pin these if you'd like to, but since they're so small, I just kind of line them up and go. I probably will pin when I sew my rows together, but I'm not really pinning as I sew these little blocks together. Okay, so that is first row done. I have 9 more rows to make, and then we can put together our little table runner quilt top. Okay, so for my rows, I am just going to press all of my seams open, and then we'll be able to start sewing our rows together. So now that we have our rows made, let's sew this into our quilt top. So I'm going to start by pinning in just the seam intersections. So I'm going to start in the middle. Okay, and we have our first 2 rows sewn together. Oh goodness, some of these, like right here, are not lining up perfectly. Do I want to adjust? Yeah, I might just adjust the center seam. You can kind of see how it's about 1/8 of an inch off in the center, and I think I can fix that fairly easily. So let me just take out basically there's like a little bit of extra fabric here that I just kind of need to ease in. So let's see here. Much better. You can see how that lines up. So let me just do the other side. Okay, yep, much better. So I fixed that little intersection here, and then everything else I think is fine. So, okay, that's my first 2 rows together. Let me get the rest of them put together. Okay, so I got all of my rows sewn together. So I've got a completed quilt runner quilt top. So let me get this pressed open and then we'll get to make our little quilt sandwich. I'm just pressing really good in these corners where all of the little points meet because those are extra bulky. These are a little more normal, but some of the intersections will be a little bit bulky, so I'm just giving those a really good press. Okay, so here is our finished table runner quilt top, all nicely pressed, and I have relocated out to my dining room table because I have a little bit more table space, because the next step is going to be to baste my quilt top to my batting and backing so that we can quilt it and bind it and finish it up. So I've got my quilt top, I've got a piece of backing fabric, and this is left over from my Christmas quilt that I just made with the same fabric line. I just had a lot of it left over, so this will be perfect for the backing. I just cut it out a couple inches bigger on all sides, that way I don't have to worry about, you know, running out of space. And then a piece of batting that is a little bit bigger than our quilt top. So let's get this laid out. Just gonna do a little dry fit and make sure that, ooh, I'm a little tight on the batting. Probably should have cut this. Oh, it's fine, no worries. Normally I'd cut it out probably a couple inches bigger, but I guess I just didn't measure quite right, but that's fine. I can go all the way to the edge on each side. So, okay, so I know it fits. So I'm gonna start with basting. I'm gonna take the top away for now and baste the batting onto my backing. And I like to use this Basting adhesive spray by Spray and Bond. It's a temporary bond, but I've left it for days and it's still basted. So yeah, this is the one I like to work with. So I'm gonna start by just pulling up this edge. Then I'm just gonna fold my batting back on top of it and give it a really good smooth to adhere everything together. Now I'm gonna roll up this side of the batting. Just trying to make sure everything is nice and smooth and that there's no wrinkles in the backing or the batting as I smooth everything out. Flip it over and make sure everything is staying nice and smooth. So I have everything positioned where I want it, and I'm gonna do the same thing to the top that I just did to the batting. I'm gonna start on this side and do these first 2 rows. Okay, so everything has now been basted and we can take this to the sewing machine and add some quilting lines. I think to quilt this, I'm just going to follow the lines of my patchwork and do some diagonal lines following kind of my seam guides. This doesn't really need to be tightly quilted. This isn't gonna be a piece like a quilt that's gonna get washed a ton. This is just gonna be a table topper. So I'll probably do maybe some lines 1/2 inch apart around the seam lines and then see if that, you know, feels good or if I need to add anything else. So let's take this to the sewing machine. Okay, so for machine quilting, I am gonna switch to my walking foot. This is the one that came with my Juki. You can also buy these kind of generic ones for any machine really on Amazon. You can kind of just look and see what's compatible with your machine, but this is what the Juki one looks like. Okay, and so I'm just going to use a cream colored thread, which this spool is almost done, but when it runs out, I've got another backup. And I'm using cream in the top and in the bobbin. And I'm going to lengthen my stitch length to a 3.0 for quilting. So I don't have like teeny tiny, well actually maybe like a 2.8. Yeah, so like a 2.8. I don't want little tiny stitches that I use for patchwork. I want slightly longer stitches for top stitching and quilting. And so I've got my quilt sandwich all basted together, and I think what I'm gonna do is just follow the diagonal lines on my quilt created by the half square triangles and kind of quilt on either side of those lines. And so I'm gonna start probably in this corner. And I'm just going to use the foot of my sewing machine foot, my walking foot, to line up and kind of mark the line that I want. Okay, so you can kind of see how the quilting lines are gonna run, and I may end up doing some, well, I don't know. I'm gonna see how it looks with just the diagonal lines and decide if I need to add any straight lines into it. So we'll see. Here's what the back is looking like so far. Okay, so here is where I'm going to leave it with the quilting. Just did the diagonal lines, and now I'm going to trim it up and get it bound. Okay, let's see, what fabric do I want to use as a binding? I know I don't want to use a white as a binding. I don't know if I want to use green. Probably red. But which red? I think I'm going to do the more solid of the reds instead of, oh, you can't even see that, instead of this one. Yeah. I am going to cut my binding strips out 2 1/4 inches. Since this is a table topper, a little bit smaller, I really want kind of a thinner binding, so I'm going to do 2 1/4 instead of 2 1/2 inch. Okay, so 3 binding strips should be plenty. Let's get the binding made. Okay, I'm gonna go to the ironing board and press these seams open and then press the binding in half, and then I'll be right back to sew it onto the quilt. And I am going to actually, let me flip this quilt over. I am gonna sew my binding on from the back side and then fold around and top stitch onto the front. Okay, so now we're going to flip it around to the front and sew it down. Let's see, I'm gonna switch out my foot. And so I'm going to just top stitch my binding to the front, and I am just gonna catch the outside edge of the binding, making sure that my stitching kind of lays right next to the binding on the back. This is my kind of favorite fast way to bind quilts. Ran out of bobbin right as I was about to be done. Okay, we have a finished table runner. Let's go put it on the table. Okay, so now we have completed the table runner. I absolutely love this. It was so fast to put together, such good bang for buck. I mean, one charm pack project, you gotta love that. I think this pattern would be perfect in any color combination for any season, so I definitely see more of these in my future. I just absolutely love how it turned out. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.